So first, I just want to start out talking a little bit about you.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you end up at Millersville?
I got a job offer. I'm a historian, and the job market is very tight. So the plan was whoever would hire me, we would go. So we certainly never thought we'd end up in Pennsylvania, but here we are. This is my 14th year here.
Wow.
So
What made you decide that you wanted to teach?
Oh, this is the family business. My dad was a college professor. My mom was a high school teacher. My brothers both also have PhDs and teach at the university level.
Wow.
It's kind of, we don't know what else to do, so this is what we do.
So just responsibilities as a professor. What is your typical day like?
Well, that does depend on whether it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or a Tuesday, Thursday. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I typically teach 4 classes, hold 1 to 2 office hours, spend the rest of the time grading, reading, doing paperwork, meeting with students. On those days, I'm usually here. Well, this semester on Mondays, I'm here from 8 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night because I teach a night class on Monday. But more typical would be being here from 8 or 9 in the morning to 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And then you get home and you do all the rest of the work that didn't get done during the day. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I do a lot more of the reading and the prep work and the grading and what little research I can sneak in between all the rest of that. I try, if I'm not teaching nights, to be home because I have 2 kids. So to actually remind them that mommy lives there is a good thing.
Yeah, of course.
Every once in a while.
What are your official responsibilities as a professor?
Trying to. I'll answer how I think you're asking it, and then you can expand to see if I don't get. So, the vast majority of us here teach 4 courses a semester. We have to hold 5 hours of office hours a week. In most departments, we advise students as well. In our department, because we also have a graduate program, so some of our teaching sometimes would be in the graduate program, and that feels a little bit different. The kind of the aims of the courses are a little different, and they're all at night, so that messes with the schedules a little bit. We create our own classes. It's not a matter of here's a class and a can, teach what we've told you to teach. So each of us, according to our expertise, will either kind of inherit classes that already existed or create classes within the framework of the kinds of stuff that we were hired to cover. We each create the syllabus in terms of what's going to get covered, what's going to get left off, what kinds of assignments, what kinds of books, how are you going to space it out over the semester. So the teaching responsibilities during the school year tend to take up the vast majority of our time. We also, so I just came from a meeting, we also do service to keep the university going. So I was just at a curriculum committee meeting where we're talking about curriculum for the multidisciplinary studies program. We had a very long department meeting on Wednesday, so we do that every so often. And then the third part of the stool is supposed to be the research and scholarship and scholarly growth. And I think for a lot of us, teaching the 4-course load, that tends to get shunted to the summers and winter break rather than trying to really integrate it into all the rest of it. I have some friends who teach 2 courses a semester, and they can do plenty of research during the semester, but it's, the 4-4 or the 5-5 loads really make that a lot more difficult.
Do you feel like you have any unofficial responsibilities that you take on?
Oh, well, this would be a good example, right?
Right.
Dr. Smith is a good friend of mine. She says, I have this student. So, yes, there's a lot of unofficial stuff. And I think that does tend to land on female professors more than on male professors. Students will come to us with their personal problems, whereas they may not go to a male professor with their personal problems. I mommy a lot. I do. I spend a lot of time making sure that students are okay and that college isn't overwhelming them. And, that's nowhere in our contract, but that's what human beings do.
Right.
So,
What is your advising caseload?
I think it's somewhere between 25 and 30 right now. It's gotten as high as 75, but our numbers are down right now. So I think it's probably around 27, 28-ish.
How many students usually utilize like your office hours?
Well, my office hours right now are at 8 o'clock in the morning, which means I think I've seen 2 or 3 all semester long. So it really does depend on kind of where you put them and whether or not you make it necessary to come into office hours. Sometimes I'll teach a course in a way that students need to come and see their tests in my office, but that usually tends to not happen until the last week before final exams, and then I have to have 20 hours of office hours for everybody to come in, and they're sitting in the hallways and on the floor, and so I think that students do not use office hours as often as they should, and I think some of that is that they don't know what office hours are. And I've started explaining that at the beginning of a class, first day of class. So office hours are this, but it hasn't necessarily meant a whole lot more students coming by. We get most of our business when first exams go back, when the last day to withdraw happens, when you need a TAP number for next semester. That's really when we begin to see students showing up.
Do you see any common problems that students come to you with when they do come to office hours?
I didn't think it was going to be this hard. I didn't know that college was different from high school. And we can say that at orientation until the cows come home. But until you live it, you can't really understand, oh wait, what I did in high school is not going to work in college, most likely. And there are some students for whom it does, but then there are a lot of students where it's fall semester and my first class is 99% freshmen, and they have been really stunned because history's supposed to be easy, and it's not. I don't teach history the way their high school teachers did. My expectations are different from what they're used to in high school. And I'm not going to give them extra credit, and I will fail them. So, the reality is that there is just this kind of moment of, this is not working the way I thought it was going to. So I think that's by far the most common thing we see fall semester. Spring semester kind of brings its other problems, like, what am I going to do with my life? That's when we see the seniors. What am I going to do with my life? I have a history major. What does that mean?
Do you see any students coming to you with any mental health problems?
All the time, yeah. So they're not necessarily coming because they are experiencing mental health problems. They're coming because they're overwhelmed and they need help, and they have exhausted everything they know how to do on their own, and that's when we'll see them. And the problem is that sometimes that's too late, right? They avoid coming and talking to us until there's not a whole lot we still have in our power to do for them. But yeah, I see a lot of students talking about problems with depression, problems with anxiety. These are, by far the most common. But because my son's on the autism spectrum and I talk about that a lot, I do get students who have autistic tendencies coming in and saying, hey, what you were saying there is really interesting because I noticed that in myself. So there's a little bit of everything. The thing that I think worries me the most is how many students are coming to us already on medications at a very vulnerable age, and then they start having their medications messed around with by their doctors, but their doctors are back home. So, the kind of supervision that you really need to have as an 18-year-old when your antidepressant dosage isn't working as well as it should, I've seen students just, not really even know what to do because of the reactions to my meds aren't working the way that I thought they were going to, but my doctor's 4 hours away. What am I going to do? So that one is one that really scares me when I see that, and we see it a lot.
What trends do you kind of see in common with those people that are coming to you for that? Like, is there a demographic trend?
Let me think about that. More female than male, but I do see male students coming in with the same kinds of issues. I think it's just female students are more willing to talk to female professors about it. I think mostly younger students, because they're on their own for the first time, they're not always doing all the best things that their moms made them do in high school. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you taking your medication at the right time? Are you seeking help when you need help? But I have had students of every age express, I'm struggling with this. I think the older students tend to have they've gotten to where they understand themselves a little bit better, and so they don't tend to come in quite as serious a crisis. They don't wait as long.
Right. What is your perception on the number of students on campus that have a mental health problem?
I really don't know. When I first started teaching, my first teaching job was not here. It was at my alma mater, which is a tiny little liberal arts school in South Carolina. And when I went through new faculty orientation, so having grown up there as a faculty brat, gone there as a student, coming back as a faculty member, one of the things that was really striking was that I think the number they gave us was 75% of the student body was taking significant antidepressant, antipsychotic medication, and that was stunning. That was it just seemed all out of proportion high to me. But when I talked to my 17-year-old, I'm not so sure that those numbers were exaggerated. I think that reflected what a wealthier, more highly educated population was already doing, and now that's kind of more the trend for the entire population. The students at that school had better access to healthcare. They had better access to, mom says I need to go see a psychiatrist, and at a place like Millersville, I think that it tends to kind of run about 5 to 10 years behind that kind of trend of the ridiculously stupidly wealthy families to normal families. I don't know. I would hazard a guess that number would still be pretty high, but it would not surprise me to see at least 50% of students on some kind of medication or treatment plan, or even kind of self-medication, right? I'm feeling really stressed, I need to do some kind of meditation. Doesn't mean they know how or what they're trying to do, as much as I identify I'm having a problem, I want to try to do something about it.
For those students that do come to you and talk about like depression or anxiety, what approaches do you use to help them?
Well, the first thing I ask them is, are you getting help? Do you know how to get help? Because I'm not qualified to give you help.
Right.
I can mother you until the day is over, but I am not a psychiatrist. I am not a psychologist. I'm a historian. So I try to make sure that they know what their resources are on campus, that they have resources at home, that they're talking to their parents or to someone that they trust who is an adult, so that it's not only, I'm 18, I'm trying to figure this out all by myself. That can get really complicated because some students have those safety nets and have had them for a long time, and some students have never had this experience before and find themselves here going, well, what do I do with this, And the issue is always, well, we have these resources on campus. Can you get into them? is there enough access? That's the really hard part.
Do you use the early alert system, or like how do you feel about it?
I do. I have had positive experiences and negative experiences with it, and I mostly use it for students who have disappeared, so they're not coming to class for long stretches of time, or students who are really struggling with their grades. And sometimes that's the same student, and sometimes it's not. I had a student last semester who I reported as non-attending. The registrar put in the Z grade that they're supposed to put in, and then the student showed back up and said, "How dare you do this to me? I was struggling with depression." I'm like, you could have said something 4 weeks ago when you disappeared. That probably would have been a better way to handle that. And it took a lot of jumping through hoops to get the student back in the classes. And, you know, they had to go through a lot of work. I had to go through a lot of work. And I think with a lot of faculty, you have that one experience once, you're not going to do it again until somebody comes along from the administration and threatens you. You must do this. You know, anything that's going to create more hassle for me, I'm going to try to avoid. But
so if a student stops showing up to class, if you don't use the early alert system, like what's your philosophy for that?
Yeah, so because I grew up at a tiny little school, our job there was if a student misses more than 2 days in a row, here is the person you must call, and that person then reaches out to the student. But that was a tiny little residential school. So that was kind of my model coming in, and I would email, and then I don't do as much of that anymore because some students find it deeply intrusive. You know, why are you bothering me? You're not my mother. And I found I was putting so much energy into that I wasn't putting energy into my own kids at home. So, you know, when you've got 150 students on your roster, yeah, I can tell you which ones aren't coming to class, but I don't necessarily have the time or the mental energy to try to reach out to each and every one of them. So that's why I think it's great that there is a more automated system, but I think that automated system is really aimed at academics and not at mental health and not at even just health, right? There's not really any place in there for you to say, I think the student really is very sick, but you know, they don't want to go to the health care. They've been to Med Alert 3 times, you know, and so that I think that the early alert system works for some things and not necessarily for physical and mental health issues that students are having. And in some cases, that's simply because they don't let the faculty know that that's what's going on.
Right. What do you think are the biggest challenges that you face in helping students that are struggling with mental health?
Well, knowing how to do it in a respectful way, right? It is very difficult to decide, I'm going to ask this student this. If a student is not volunteering, this is what's going on. You know, just deciding whether or not you're going to ask is really kind of difficult, because is it my business? I mean, it is, but
right.
It isn't.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, my other big concern is if I try to say to a student, I really think that you're struggling with whether or not you have a mental health issue, I think you should go to the counseling center. Well, then they go to the counseling center and they get told, well, there's a 5-week wait list. They're not going to go back.
Right.
So, you know, I think that at least anecdotally, it certainly seems like they're overwhelmed over there, and they don't have the staffing that they need, and they can't deal with all of the problems that students are coming to them with.
Yeah. Do you feel like you were trained at all in
dealing with that? Absolutely not. Not at all. And this is actually something that I've talked about with several other faculty members is, There's a lot of stuff they don't tell you in grad school that you're going to be doing. And watching a student cry and express suicidal thoughts in your office is really high up the list. I don't know how to deal with that any more than any other person walking down the street, other than the fact that I'm a parent. So, I have some experiences that I can bring to that, but no expertise. It's just, I'm trying to respond to you as a caring human being, and beyond that, I really don't know what to do. And that's scary as hell. It really is.
So just in wrapping up, in your ideal world, like, what resources would you have for these students that we may or may not have right now?
Definitely more staffing for the counseling center, longer hours for the counseling center, nights, weekends. The times when students are more likely to have problems, we don't have anyone there. Because of my own family issues, I am really disappointed with the resources for matriculating students with autism spectrum disorders, and that is entirely different from Jan Bechtel's program. Those students are so well supported, and that program is put together so well. The integrated studies program, I'm just really impressed with. But students who are high functioning and are simply coming in as a student like everybody else, if they register with the Office of Learning Services, the kinds of accommodations that they're given are completely inappropriate for students with autism. There's a complete disconnect there, and that really bothers me and disappoints me. But that's a lot more about me as a parent than necessarily. I actually now have a lot of faculty who will come to me and say, well, how do I better do this? I have this student who is really struggling with, I have this big project, and they're saying, I don't know how to even begin. What do I do? Well, if we'd been taught what high school teachers and middle school teachers and elementary school teachers have been taught, we would know how to chunk that down for students, but we don't. So the only reason I do is that I've had to learn it at home. And so, if I'm spending time teaching other faculty how to do this, that says something pretty significant about what's not being done, because it's all a matter of, do you even know me well enough to come and say, hey, I have this student, can you help me figure out what to do? If that's what we're leaving it to, that's a real issue.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
That is everything that I needed.
Great.
So I will be just using this in my paper, so it's really
Excellent.
good to kind of get opinions of different faculty members.